Welcome back, everyone. I'm glad you decided to watch my video today. I know I haven't posted anything in a while, and that's because it's been a slow period for projects for me. There hasn't been a lot coming in. My shop isn't set up for the projects that I really want to do. The weather's been kind of cold recently, and my regular daytime job has been getting in the way. But today, I'm finally getting back to some projects, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to be working on for the next few weeks. So the build I'm going to be working on is actually a special build to me, and that's because this is my very first customer build. It's a direction that I've wanted to go in, and this is a perfect first step for me. A gentleman that rents a space near where I rent saw the build I did on the S10. He really liked it, thought I did some good work, and asked if I would do a build for him. I said yes. So what I'm going to be working on is a 1947 Chevy pickup. And it's unique, other than the 80s graphics and the matte black paint, is that someone has also taken the roof and the rear part of the cab off and made it a permanent convertible. It has no soft top, so it's definitely a unique build, and it's something I'm looking forward to. This truck, I'm guessing, had the original inline 6 engine in it. At some point, someone swapped in a Chevy 350 engine and a turbo 350. And I'm going to be taking that out, and I'm going to be putting in this 5.3 LS based truck engine. So I have my new intake on now. It is a dual plane intake that adapts to the LS style head with the cathedral ports. So that's on and all taken care of. The next thing I need to do is put a new flex plate on. Since this is being installed onto a transmission, a turbo 350 transmission, the stock flex plate for the LS series will not work with that torque converter setup. So this is a flex plate from Advanced Adapters. It's got a little dish right there so that it offsets the teeth and the mounting surface for the torque converter so that it can be mounted properly to the turbo 350. And they also include this crank spacer adapter that goes into the end of the crank, because the end of the crank on the LS series is a little bit shorter than on like a general 350 engine. So you got to put this in there, and this will capture the end of the torque converter and keep it aligned. So all I have to do now is take the flex plate, bolt it on there, and then I can mock up the trans and the torque converter onto this, and then I can get it into the truck so that I can start to figure out where my motor mount plates need to be. So I have now prepped the engine to come out of the truck, and hopefully it will come out rather easily. And I'm finding things that make me not very happy with whoever built this before. So on the one side of the engine mount, we had this bolt that has 2 washers on the one end, both way too thin to be an adequate washer. The bolt was about 1.5 inches too long, which was not good. And on the other end, I found a carriage bolt. These are good for wood, not good for car builds, truck builds, any kind of build you're doing. You'd never want to use a carriage bolt, because if that little square rounds off in whatever you have it in, you have no way to getting it out. And the bolt was also not the correct grade, because maybe you can see this in the camera, it's got a hump and it's all worn. So this is junk. And there's other stuff I'll show once I get the engine out that I'm also not very thrilled about how they built this. But that aside, let's get this thing out of here and I can show you what all is going on inside the engine bay. So now we can talk about some of the questionable things on this truck build that someone did before. The first and easiest to show is this transmission crossmember. The first hackery is they very poorly slotted these holes in the opposite direction to get the transmission to work. That's number one. Number two, the welds on these ends are not good, and they did not even weld all the way around on either side. So I will need to be fixing that. When they ran the wires, they, I guess, ran out of loom or something, but they just zip tied them to the front here. Nothing to protect the wire from those sharp corners when you're driving around. I'm not even sure what these are. Marker lights, maybe? Who knows? Let's see. They two-pieced the fuel line, which is not good because A, they didn't even cut the hoses straight, and B, it leaks. So you really don't want to two-piece your fuel line. For the steering that they put there, they notched out a part of the cross member that it appears to be, this is a cross member that was welded in. I've seen these for sale for these kinds of swaps, but they cut a notch out of it, never welded anything back in there, and they cut a huge notch out of the motor mount so that the steering could come through. But yeah, that's not how you do it. If you're going to cut that much out of it, you got to do something better. The welds are questionable. Got some grapes over there. These welds don't seem too bad, nor do those welds. That's not so great. They fabricated this radiator mount thing out of some channel. It would have been much cleaner if you just got some tubing and did a nice sweeping bend up, and for that would have just been much better than what they did. They used these clips to mount the wire harness to the firewall, yet on the fuel line down there they just zip tied it to the frame. It's like, if you're going to zip tie anything, zip tie this to the firewall and use these clips for the fuel line to the frame. And that's just what I found in the front here. I haven't even looked underneath the back of the truck yet. So those motor mounts are going to go away. I got to cut them off because I got a kit that bolts on, and I think it's going to bolt into those 4 holes on the top, but I haven't opened the kit yet. So I'm going to clean that up, splash a little paint on it where it needs to be, and then I can work on mating the engine and the transmission together and dropping them in here to see where everything kind of lands. I'm not sure what I can do as far as radiator and fan setup until I get it in there. So first thing to do is to clean up some of the wiring, pull that harness out because I can't use it anymore. I'll have to do something as far as the light harness and using that. I'm not sure what I'm doing for that right yet, but then I can cut those mounts off and work on just cleaning it up and getting ready for the new engine. So I've got the transmission mocked up onto the engine now. It's not final because I'm gonna have to take this in and out at least 1 or 2 more times. So 4 bolts just holding the transmission on. I don't even have the torque converter in yet because I don't want to deal with that. So what I'm going to do now is get this in here and try to figure out where it needs to go. I'd like to keep the transmission where it was with the original 350 engine in it. And what I'm using for an engine mount are these CPP adapter kit. So this is a LS adapter kit. It's got a plate that bolts onto the engine block, and then it's got these mounts, which are just solid rubber mounts, much better than what was on the 350 engine, even though it's the same style, and it is adjustable, so I can try to figure out where I need to put it to go and fit on that frame member. It comes with this cross member, which just sits up underneath of there, and then what holds the cross member to the frame are these little pieces. So I will cut the cross member to length because it's unfortunately a little too long, and then I can figure out where these go, mark the frame, drill the frame, and then I can weld all this stuff together, and then I can put the engine in there where it needs to go. I am shocked, but it fits. It was touch and go there for a while. I didn't think I was gonna make it get in there, but the transmission cross member surprisingly lines up where it needs to go, which means I can use that same drive shaft that came with the truck. I mean, it's close. I mean, I got no room to work with. I actually had to take all the coil packs off this side because the bracket was hitting back here. So that might need some adjustment. I might have to, you know, slide the coil packs over here somewhere. But good golly, it fits. I can't believe it. And looks like I'm going to, these are back all the way. And it's going to fit kind of almost right about, it's a little back further than where the stock 350 mounts that someone welded on were. So that's actually not too bad. Steering, however, is going to be an issue. Because right now, the column comes out here. I need headers to go in here, and it needs to go down here. So we're going to have to figure something out with that. But that's not for this episode, that's for next episode. So right now, I'm just going to get a rough measurement of my engine cross member so I can cut that down. And I can just kind of put that up in there and figure out about-ish where everything needs to go. I was hoping that maybe I could mount everything without having to take off the, grind off the existing mounts, but that might not work. Only because I can't grind or cut in here because of wood floor. So that sucks, but yeah, I can't believe it fit. I'm actually in shock. So right now I'm just going to take up some measurements, cut my cross member to what it needs to be, and start figuring out where I need to put those plates that I showed you earlier. So let's get to it. This is the exact reason why when people do stuff like this, they make it themselves. This was supposed to be an easily bought kit. It's supposed to fit. You would think that the kit you buy would actually at least fit the engine. I get it if it doesn't fit the car. That's different. You know, cars change. The engine doesn't change. Why doesn't this fit? So there's a bunch of different ways I could go about fixing this. I can either cut here, bend these up on both sides. I could cut in the middle, add a piece, sleeve it, weld it. Or I can slot these holes for these bolts and drop these hole mounts down. None of those are easy options. Out of all of them, I think what I want to do is slot the holes. It would be much easier if I had a mill, which right now I don't. It's on the list of things that I want to get to make stuff like this easier, but right now I'm going to have to do it all by hand, and it's going to be tedious. So here we go. And here we go. 2 slotted holes on each bracket. And I will admit, I have done worse work, but it actually went okay. Drill some holes, then just use my die grinder, my air die grinder to clean up the bit in between. So now we will see if this will actually fix our problem of the bracket not fitting on the mounts. So let's give it a try. And only with a few significant modifications will your brackets that you bought online to be a bolt-on swap then continue to work. I did the slotting and it fits perfectly now. That only took an extra 2 hours that it wasn't supposed to. And one thing I didn't mention before is I actually had to shorten these tubes to fit between these ears because they were 1/4 of an inch too long on both sides. So be careful when you're ordering crap like that online. They say it may fit, it might not fit. So, and now that I have this bolted on like I want to, I'm going to swing this back into the truck and figure out exactly if I need to trim a little bit more off the sides of my mount here. And if that's the case, I can trim them. I can also trim the brackets that will bolt to the frame. I can trim them down, get everything in there and figure out where it needs to go, weld it, drill the holes, bolt it, and then this engine will be mounted in there permanently. So I've got my brackets in there and sort of aligned. I have the engine all centered up. So now what I need to do is I need to mark so that I can weld these. And unfortunately, since I can't tack them where my current shop is, I just need to mark them and then take them and weld them. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to mark the rotation of the bracket with my auto punch and try not to bump the engine because I have that all centered. make 2 marks just so I can be sure I get it right. And then I'm going to take my scribe I'm also going to scribe so I know where in and out is when I go to set this up and weld it. This is not the most ideal way to do this, but since I can't weld in my shop, this is the way I'm going to have to do it. And I'm also going to do a rough scribe on the frame so I can drill the holes in the frame to bolt this on. So now it's done, just gotta go do the other side. Alright, so I have my brackets laid out on the frame for my new engine cross member, and I will tell you it was a huge pain. So the cross member doesn't really fit in there as nice as I would, but you can see I've got it all laid out there, my holes center marked. Because I couldn't weld it down here in the barn, I had to take the cross member out, mark it as best as I could, weld it, and then bring it back. And things will always get a little off when you do that, but overall it turned out okay. But it was just a huge pain trying to get everything marked out, get the engine level and everything I needed it to be. So now that I've got it all marked out, let's get to drilling. Alright, so my cross member is all bolted in. Didn't have too many dramas with it. The holes lined up where I need to put the bolts through pretty well. And if you're wondering how I got the bolts to go in through the side of the frame like that, needle nose vice grips are a man's best friend when his big hand can't fit in through that frame rail. I had to fit it in through here, so that was a challenge, but got that done. Got my torque converter bolt into the transmission and onto the flywheel. I have the transmission fully bolted on now. I just had temporary before, so all the bolts are in. One bolt just doesn't work with the LS setup, and you also have one bolt on the block that won't line up. Not a big deal. You got 5 bolts in there. That should be plenty. So now I'm gonna be dropping this engine in for hopefully the last time. Here we go. Well, that ended up being a lot more difficult than it should have been. I started filming it, but it was just taking so long. I was getting so frustrated. I just turned the camera off. I was having a lot of trouble with getting the engine to at such an angle that the oil pan would clear my engine cross member but not hit the firewall. And ultimately, I got it in. It was a huge pain. I do have to clearance a bit of the firewall. I made a slight adjustment when I mounted my engine cross member. I raised the engine up just a bit so I would have more clearance from the oil pan to the suspension cross member, and it gave me a little too close of a clearance at the firewall. So I'll have to take care of that, but overall the engine is in, bolted in. I hope it doesn't have to come out again. I will be extremely upset with myself if I do. I did learn something that I should have known from the beginning, and when I did the S10 build, I had to separate the engine and transmission because there just wasn't enough room. This truck was the exact same way. I would have saved myself a lot of time and stress if I would have just broken them apart and put them in together. It would have been so much easier, but lesson learned for next time. So that's the end of this video. The next big thing I'm going to tackle is going to be the steering, and I'll do that on a future video. Thanks for watching.